And gradually, through the centuries of more and more resistance to the tyranny of their own government, the British government, that phrase came to be known as due process of law. So the idea was that, hey, Mr. King, or hey, Mr. President, or whatever, you're not going to be able to seize anybody and punish them for some criminal offense or alleged criminal offense unless you go through these procedures. Due process of law, trial by jury, right to counsel, right to confront witnesses. I mean, these are the constitutional guarantees in the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 8th Amendments. And the reason they were there, remember the reason why the Bill of Rights was enacted in the first place, was because the American people weren't enthusiastic about the idea of a federal government. You know, when it was proposed after the Constitutional Conventions, Americans were leery. They suspected that this new federal government would end up attracting totalitarian-like people, people that would do the same thing that the British king had been doing. And that's what they were concerned with. And, of course, there were those that said, oh, no, not in America. We don't have those kind of people in America. But the American people said, oh, bull. Those people exist everywhere. It's like in their DNA, and they're going to be coming after us, and they're going to be born and all this, and it doesn't matter how you bring them up or whatever, it's in their DNA to try to do these kind of things. And so how did they protect us or them? You know, they said, well, you know, we're going to demand this Bill of Rights, which was really a bill of prohibitions, and it didn't just guarantee freedom of speech and freedom of the press and gun rights and so forth. The 4th, 5th, 6th, and 8th Amendments, 4 amendments dealing with the power of the government to go out and seize somebody and just cart them away. So those are the protections. It says, no, before you do that, you have to go through these obstacles. They're sort of like barbed wire entanglements that the government's required to go through. Well, that's the system we lived in, you know, for more than 200 years. I mean, it was really, I mean, there's a lot of problems with the criminal justice system in the federal system, but really when you compare it to all the others around the world and all the others in history, I mean, we had the greatest, you know, constitutional legal system that one can never imagine. I mean, these obstacles, these barbed wire entanglements were something that we were proud of. That, hey, if a foreigner came in, he would be treated just like an American. You know, he'd have to be indicted in a federal court. They'd have to prosecute him. He's entitled to presumption of innocence. If he couldn't afford a lawyer would be appointed for him. His justice in that system would be just like that of the American people. I mean, it was a remarkable system.
Imagine you're an American arrested by the United States military, not by civilian law enforcement, on U.S. soil. And imagine the military had the right to hold you forever.
It is not what a free society is all about. It is antithetical to the principles of a free society. You cannot be free. Ask any Egyptian. You cannot be free as long as the government wields this kind of dictatorial power.
The president can arrest whoever he wants anywhere in the United States of America and keep them without charging them with a crime, without letting them see a lawyer, without bringing them to a judge for as long as he wants.
That gives the military the right now to, you know, arrest anybody, a person like me that really doesn't dig what's going on in a lot of places, and call me a terrorist. I have no lawyer, no rights, I'm gone. Woof, they ship me overseas. You know, anything.
Give the president the power to be judge, jury, and executioner.
That's the law now, that entitles them to round up people, send them into military dungeons, send them into concentration camps, simply on the basis of a label put on them by the military, the CIA, the president, that they're a terrorist. Okay? No court trial, no jury trial, no nothing.
We're talking about the repeal of the United States Constitution. And what we see from the vote against the amendment by Rand Paul, the Republican senator from Kentucky, to exempt American citizens from this amendment to the Defense Authorization Bill that would allow the military to simply pick up any American citizen anywhere on earth and hold them indefinitely without charges. What we see is that Rand Paul's amendment got voted down by the U.S. Senate.
The power is now possessed by the government. It's now in its tool chest. Major crisis hits, they start rounding up people.
How alien would that be to see troops with rifles and helmets marching in our streets, Congressman Amash? Something we haven't seen in America since Reconstruction.
Again, it would be a travesty. It's what our founders fought against. It's why we became an independent nation. It's why we fought to put the Constitution in place and create a system where liberty would be defended. And if we go back to the old way, then it's the same as though we were under British rule.
The government is using fear to scare us into justifying its actions.
Those of you that are familiar with Robert Higgs's book, Crisis and Leviathan, know that crises are the best way for government to get power, to expand their powers. Why? Well, it's obvious, because people are scared. And when people are scared, they're going to say, do whatever is necessary to make me safe, to keep me safe. All I want to do is just be kept safe. That's all I care about. So do whatever you think is necessary to keep me safe.
Do you see American troops, young men and women, arresting other Americans because the president doesn't like what they've said? What would you tell your constituents who admire your love and defense of freedom that they should do if the military comes calling?
Well, I don't believe that they should comply with any sort of detention attempts on the homeland here. Taking American citizens from their homes is outrageous. And so I believe no one should be forced to comply with that.
The United States military arresting American citizens and putting them in concentration camps.
I wonder how the American people will feel when they see troops in the streets on a regular basis, something no one now living has seen since it ended the last time in 1876. What if the liberties enshrined in our Constitution have been transformed into a myth? What if the idea of a Constitution guaranteeing freedom is rich in rhetorical flourish and patriotic fervor, but absent of real meaning? What if the state of freedom in America is actually worse than you think? What if the government had no intention of keeping you safe, but only of using your fears to curb your freedoms? What if the government transitioned effortlessly between rhetoric that referred to foreign enemies and rhetoric that referred to policies at home? What if the government gave itself the power to treat you the same way it treats an enemy on a battlefield? What if your elected representatives actually voted to declare the United States of America a battlefield? What if that included your backyard? What if you woke up one day and soldiers were there because the president sent them? What if they came for you because of your political views? What if the freedom we have was possible in the first place only because we once had a constitution and once had governments that were faithful to it? What if the Constitution has just become a piece of paper that the government laughs at? What if the government didn't feel bound by the Constitution anymore? What if our rights were conditioned on government approval? What if they were rarely taken away openly and obviously in the day of light, but were chipped away slowly through regulation and fear? What if that's how you were controlled? What if anyone could be detained indefinitely because we're all on a battlefield? What if the government could turn off the media that criticized it? What if one day the government targeted Freedom Watch? What if one night the government targeted you?
Muslims, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a Muslim. Then they came for immigrants, detaining them indefinitely, solely upon the certification of the Attorney General, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't an immigrant. Then they came to enter homes and offices for unannounced sneak and peek searches, and I didn't speak up because I had nothing to hide. Then they came to arrest American citizens and hold them indefinitely without any charges and without access to lawyers. And I didn't speak up because I would never be arrested. Then they came for immigrants and students from selected countries, luring them under the requirements of special registration as a ruse to seize them and detain them. And I didn't speak up because I wasn't required to register. Then they came for anyone who objected to government policy because it only aided the terrorists and gave ammunition to America's enemies. And I didn't speak up because I didn't speak up. And then they came for me, and by that time, no one was left to speak up.
What if your rights were the government's to grant and to give away? What if our rights didn't come from God or from our humanity, but from the government? What if the government really thinks we're not unique individuals with immortal souls, but just public property? What if we're only entitled to our natural rights if it pleases the government? What if our rights could be stripped away whenever the government considers us to be its enemy? What if all this could be accomplished with our consent? What if the people's own representatives subverted the Constitution? What if the people were so afraid that they accepted the subversion? What if the government demonizes an external enemy and uses fear of that enemy to suppress our freedoms? What if people are afraid to protest this? What if the government knows this and so chooses enemies that are easily demonized, whether they pose real threats or not? What if threats become imminent dangers precisely because the government allows them to happen? What if government scapegoating an external enemy is as old as the government itself? What if the government has used scapegoating again and again to scare people into giving up their freedoms voluntarily? What if the government relied on this to perform the same magical disappearing freedom act time and time again throughout history? What if the government could lock you up and throw you in jail indefinitely? What if that jail was in Cuba? What if the government has written laws to let it detain you forever without letting you see a lawyer or appear before a judge? What if you were just speaking out against the government and it came to silence you? What if the government could declare you its enemy and then kill you? What if your elected representatives did nothing to stop the government from doing this? What if the government claimed that your words made you a warrior, even though there's never been any armed hostilities in your neighborhood, even though you never carried a gun and you never threatened anyone? What if the government could classify the entire country as a battlefield and ultimately a prison? What if the government's goal was to be rid of all those who disagreed with it? What if the real war was a war of misinformation? What if the government constructs its own reality in order to suit its own agenda? What if civil liberties didn't mean anything to the government? What if it just chose to allow us to exercise them because at the moment we don't threaten it? What if the government released a report calling you a domestic terror threat just because you disagreed with the government? What if the government coaxed crazy people into acting like terrorists just to keep you afraid? What if the government persuaded you to believe that the greatest threat to your freedom is an impoverished and uneducated third world population 10,000 miles away? What if the real threat to your freedom is a rich, powerful, and all-seeing government? What if that government thinks it can write any law and regulate any behavior and tax any event no matter what the Constitution says? What if the government is always the greatest threat to freedom because only the government can constitute a monopoly on the use of force? What if, in fact, at its essence, government is simply a monopoly on force? What if, in fact, at its essence, government is simply the negation of freedom? What if the government monopoly incubated, aided, and abetted the enemies of freedom? What if the government had a multiplier effect on dangers and threats, and even when the government said it was trying to mitigate danger, in fact, it was only making it worse? What if when the danger got more threatening, the government told you to sacrifice more of your liberties for safety? What if you fell for that? What if those who traded safety for liberty ended up in government camps? What if the greatest threat to freedom was not any outfit of thugs in some cave in a far-off land, but an organized force here at home? What if that organized force broke its own laws? What if that organized force did the very same things to those it hates and fears that it prosecutes people for doing to it? What if I'm right and the government's wrong? What if it's dangerous to be right when the government is wrong? What if government is essentially always wrong and always dangerous? What if these weren't just hypothetical or rhetorical questions? What if this is actually happening to us? What if the ultimate target in the government's war on terror is all who believe in personal freedom? What if that group includes you? What do we do about it?